نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. This is another lesson that we're having, reading from Nasihati in Nisa by Al-Shaykha Abdullah Al-Wadi'iyya, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala. Then she mentions about, and she does this while she's discussing the affair of the individual striving for the akhirah and for gaining the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal. She says, وَقَدْ كَانَ الصَّحَابَةُ رِضْوَانَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِمْ هِمَمُهُمْ عَالِيَةٌ لَا يَسْأَلُونَ إِلَّا عَنِ الْجَنَّةِ وَلَا يُرِيدُونَ إِلَّا إِيَّاهَا. The position of the affair of the companions was that their desire was very high. They did not ask except for Jannah, and they did not desire anything other than it. Then she mentions the hadith on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and she's going to mention several ahadith to show how the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were constantly asking about Jannah. So she mentions the hadith on the authority of Abu Hurairah. His name is Abdurrahman ibn Sakhr al-Dawsi radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he's the individual that has the most hadiths from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even though he entered Islam late. He says, أن أعربيا أتى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال دلني على عمل إذا عملته دخلت الجنة. Guide me to an action that if I performed it, I would enter into Jannah. And that is the point. That is the point of her mentioning this hadith, is that a Bedouin came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, Ya Rasulullah, inform me of an action. If I were to do it, I would enter into Jannah. So even though this individual is a Bedouin, and from the nature of a Bedouin is that they are individuals who are not very learned, they're individuals who are tough, they're individuals who are very rough. But this individual, what is his goal? His goal is to enter the paradise of Allah Azza wa Jal. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded by saying, "Ta'budullaha wa la tushriku bihi shay'an, wa tuqimu as-salata wa tu'ti az-zakata al-mafruda wa tasumu Ramadan." You worship Allah, you do not commit any partners with Him, or you do not set up any partners with Him. You perform the salat, you give the zakat, the obligatory charity, and you fast the month of Ramadan. And this narration doesn't have the Hajj, and the scholars disagree. Was Hajj obligatory at that time, and the likes. At any rate, when the man heard that, he said, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِي, I swear by the one whom my soul is in his hand, meaning I swear by Allah. لَا أُزِيدُ عَلَى هَذَا, I will not do more than this. That's it. You've told me something that if I perform it, I would enter the paradise of Allah. I swear by Allah, I am not going to do more. That's it. This is what I need. I need this right here. I'm going to suffice with this right here. فَلَمَّا وَلَّى الرَّجُلُ قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من سره أن ينظر إلى رجل من أهل الجنة فلينظر إلى هذا. The Prophet, when the man turned away, after he got the answer that he needed, after he got what would enter him into paradise, he turned away. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever desires, or whoever would like to look at a man from the people of Jannah, look at that man. Look at that man, an individual that, an individual who asks about Jannah, and an individual who has a focal point in his life, and that is the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal. 2, he's an individual who he wants to know what's obligatory upon him. He wants to know what's obligatory upon him. 3, he is basically declaring, I'm going to do this action. I'm just going to live my life performing the action that's going to enter me into Jannah. So these noble characteristics that were present in this individual, because of that, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever wants to look at a person from the people of Jannah, look at that man. So it shows you the companions, it shows you what they were upon, it shows you their intent. And we know the hadith of Abu Huraira, and she's going to mention some more, but just as in addition, we know the hadith of Abu Huraira, where the hadith in Sahih Bukhari and others, and it's in several places in Sahih Bukhari. From among, I think the first place it is in Sahih Bukhari is the chapter of knowledge. Chapter of knowledge. Abu Huraira radiallahu ta'ala came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, Ya Rasulullah, man as'ad al-nas bi shafa'atika yawm al-qiyamah. Well, Abu Huraira came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, Ya Rasulullah, who is the most happy or the happiest individual who will receive your intercession on the day of judgment? So we find Abu Huraira asking about Jannah. Who would be the happy person to receive your intercession on the day of judgment? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I felt no one would ask that question before you. لِمَا رَأَيْتُ مِنْ حِرْسِكَ. He said, Prophet said, Abu Huraira, I felt that no one would ask that question before you because of that which I witnessed of your diligence in seeking knowledge. Your diligence in seeking knowledge. And the Prophet ﷺ went on to answer the question by mentioning the happiest person to receive my intercession on the day of judgment is a person that said the shahada mukhlisan min qalbihi, sincerely from his heart. So that also shows you how the companions were always asking about Jannah. Individual came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, Ya Rasulullah, inni as'aluka marafataka fil Jannah. Companion came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, Ya Rasulullah, I ask for your companionship in paradise. Ya Rasulullah, I ask for your companionship in paradise. So this was what they were about. This was their norm. This was their habit. Their habit was to know, what do I need to gain the pleasure of Allah? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Mu'adh, Ya Mu'adh, inni uhibbuk. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this was their norm to ask, and it was the norm of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to direct them even without asking. That hadith where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Ya Mu'adh, inni uhibbuk. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Oh Mu'adh, I love you. So do not forget to say at the end of every salat, Allahumma inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husn ibadatik. Oh Allah. So the Prophet said, Mu'adh, oh Mu'adh, I love you. So do not forget to say at the end of every prayer, Oh Allah, assist me in your remembrance and your gratitude and the fine worship of you. The fine worship of you. And in that, I rushed in that hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said to, when the individual said to the Prophet ﷺ, Oh, Ya Rasulullah, I ask to be your companion, or I ask for your companionship in Jannah. The Prophet ﷺ said, A'inni ala nafsika bi kathrati sujood. The Prophet ﷺ said, assist me in helping you by prostrating a lot. By increasing in your prostration, meaning increasing in your worship of Allah Azza wa Jal. In your worship of Allah Azza wa Jal. So we find in all of those things, we find that the companions are asking about what would gain the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal. And we find that the Prophet ﷺ is always directing them to what? To worship of Allah. To the worship of Allah and Tawheed. To the worship of Allah and Tawheed. We have in this hadith, when the person say, Ya Rasulullah, give me an action that if I were to do it, I would enter into Jannah. The first thing the Prophet ﷺ said, Tawheed. And ta'bud Allah wa la tushriku bihi shay'a. And ta'bud Allah wa la tushriku bihi shay'a. Tawheed. That is the asas. That is the asl. That is the foundation. So that is what we encourage, or that is what we should be upon. That we build a strong foundation of Tawheed, and that we are constant in the worship. We are constantly involved in the worship of Allah Azza wa Jal. Then Abdullah goes on to mention another hadith. And notice her speech is not plentiful. She has a lot of speech. From time to time, she might mention a sentence or two or three sentences of wisdom, something shared from a father. But in general, she's mentioning hadith after hadith, verses after verses, right? So then she mentions another hadith in Sahih Bukhari on the authority of Anas bin Malik, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and his kunya. He's also from amongst the individuals who have many hadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his name is his kunya is Abu Hamza. His kunya is Abu Hamza, and we know his mother was a very famous companion, Sulaim, the wife of Abu Talha. So Anas bin Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu, annahu sami'ahu, and Anas bin Malik also, his mother, the qissa of Anas bin Malik, his mother came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when Anas bin Malik was small. And she said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, this is my young boy, let him serve you. Let him serve you. And there's a lot of things that's mentioned in the life of Sulaim with regards to her firmness in the religion and her love of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and desire to serve Islam. So Anas bin Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that he said, he heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا ذهب إلى قبى يدخل على حرام بنت ملحان. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if he would go to Masjid Quba, Masjid Quba, and Masjid Quba now is very close to, or it's very easy to get to from the Masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But previously, during over 1400 years ago, it would take a long time to walk on foot, or even to ride on camel or a donkey. It would take a long time to get to Masjid Quba. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if he would visit Masjid Quba, he would visit a female by the name of Haram bint Milhan. And she was married to Ubadah bin Samit. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was common that he would visit the homes of his companions. It was common that he would visit the homes of his companions. And obviously, if the female were present, they would act in the best of manners. And they would speak to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from behind a hijab and the likes. So he would visit this family, and she would feed him. So one day the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam visited this family, and he took a nap. And he woke up, and he was when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam woke up, he was laughing. So she said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "What makes you laugh, O Messenger of Allah?" And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "There would be some people among my followers, they were displayed." And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a dream. And in that dream, he saw Muslims, individuals from amongst his companions. They were shown to him fighting in the way of Allah Azza wa Jal, and they were sailing over the ocean like kings on thrones. Then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when she heard this, bint Haram, or Afwan, Haram bint Milhan, when she heard this, she said, "Ya Rasulullah, ask Allah, supplicate to Allah, or invoke Allah to make me from amongst them." Invoke Allah to make me from amongst them. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam invoked Allah, then he put his head down and he went to sleep again. After some time, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam woke up laughing again. And once again she said, "Ya Rasulullah, what is bringing about this laughter?" And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said the same thing, that I saw some of my followers, they are involved in a battle for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. They are as if they're kings on thrones. They are sailing in the sea as if they are kings on thrones. when she heard that from the Prophet ﷺ for the second time, she said, Ya Rasulullah, invoke Allah to make me from amongst them. The Prophet ﷺ said, you are from the first of them. You are from the first of them. Then the narrator mentioned, and the narrator is Anas bin Malik, he said that the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned during the time of Muawiyah, when Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan was the ruler, the Muslims had actually, they went on ships and they were traveling to a particular land to fight that land. And she was from amongst the people that boarded the ship to accompany the army. And during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, yes, you had women who accompanied the army for the purpose of being nurses, for the purpose of taking care of the wounded troops and the likes. So she was from amongst the individuals who had joined that army. And when they reached the land, her riding beast, like a camel or the likes, it was coming off of the ship, and something happened. She fell off of it and she died. She fell off of it and she died. So the reality is, Allah Azza wa Jal answered the supplication of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She was from the first, meaning she was from the first to die in that battle. She was from the first to die in that battle. So, and this hadith is reported in Sahih Bukhari as well as in Sahih Muslim. So we find that this Sahabiya, and the first hadith that was mentioned was the hadith of the Bedouin man who came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Rasulullah, inform me of an action that if I were to perform it, I would enter into Jannah. So we find a male companion asking the Prophet ﷺ of something that would assist him in entering into Jannah. And in this hadith, we find a female companion of the Prophet ﷺ asking the same thing. Ya Rasulullah, invoke Allah that I'm from amongst them, that I am from the individuals who would be involved in fighting in the way of Allah Azza wa Jal, and in fighting in the way of Allah Azza wa Jal, and I would be like, a king on the throne, or be like a king on the throne. So it shows you that which they were upon. They had eagerness and desire to. Their eagerness and desire is to what? Is to enter the Jannah of Allah Azza wa Jal. But they, of course, they did it in a legislative manner, not like you have individuals today, especially people that are joining ISIS. They hear about they hear about jihad and the reward of the martyr and the likes of that, and they immediately go join this terrorist, Islamic extremist, Khawarij group, and they don't do it with any dawabits. They don't do it with any type of limitations, with any type of understanding. It's important for them to understand that the Prophet ﷺ, the same way the Prophet ﷺ informed about the reward of the martyr and fighting in the way of Allah, also the Prophet ﷺ spoke about be aware of the deviant leaders, and the Prophet ﷺ spoke about the person who kills unjustly will not smell the fragrance of Jannah. And the Prophet ﷺ spoke about there would be people calling to the gates of the hellfire. And the Prophet ﷺ spoke about the Khawarij being the dogs of the hellfire. And the Prophet ﷺ spoke about, if I were to meet the Khawarij, I would kill them. And the Prophet ﷺ spoke about, whoever meets them, then kill them. And if they kill him, his reward is Jannah. And the Prophet ﷺ spoke about all of these things. So we need to make sure, before an individual has the desire to fight in the way of Allah and to gain the pleasure of Allah, this individual needs to make sure, absolutely sure, with no doubt, that which he's doing is not what the Prophet ﷺ warned against. The Prophet ﷺ, and that is the way of the Khawarij, unfortunately, that they take some of the nusus and they leave others. They take some of the texts, they take some of the religion, and they leave the other part of the religion. So an individual merely, and that's what they do. So an individual merely reading the merits of fighting in the way of Allah, an individual merely reading the merits of fighting in the way of Allah without making absolutely sure, without a shadow of a doubt, that he is not joining the Khawarij and he's not joining the army of of the Dajjal, and he's not joining, he's not becoming from the ranks of the dogs of the hellfire, and he's not following a deviant ruler, and he's not killing people unjustly. Without doing that, you will fall in exactly, you would fall into that which the Prophet ﷺ has warned his companions against, has warned his companions and his ummah against. But that is the way of the Khawarij. Unfortunately, that is the way of the Khawarij, and that is the way of the deviants. They don't take all of the religion. So when you find method in ISIS, and I don't mean to go off like this, but because of the importance of it, when you find ISIS looking for individuals to join their group, when you find them recruiting, you only find them mentioning and spreading the merits of fighting in the way of Allah. Okay, why don't you defend, clarify, so that there's without a shadow of a doubt that you are not from the Khawarij, and that your actions are not the actions of the Khawarij, and that your killings are justified. No, you don't find them doing that, because yes, when they do that, individuals would be clear, absolutely clear, that this is not correct. This is not correct, and their actions are totally in opposition to the way of the Prophet ﷺ, in total opposition to the tenets of Islam and the legislation of Islam. So now the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, and look at what they're doing. The Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, they are going to the Prophet to ask about Jannah. They're going to the Prophet ﷺ to ask about Jannah, clarity about Jannah. How do I enter it? What is expected from me? This, that. They're not just, listening to anyone. They're not just listening to anyone. And that is the way of the companions and the tabi'un who came after them. You have in Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, the individuals that heard shubuhat, the individuals that heard people talking about this, talking about that. What would they do? They would get on their riding beasts, they would prepare their food, their clothing, their provisions, and they would travel for days until they come into the company of a companion of the Prophet ﷺ, and they would say, we heard this, we heard that, we wanted to meet. We wanted to meet a companion from the Prophet so that we can clarify this affair. But now, no, that is not the case. With people that join ISIS and people that join these other jihadi groups, what do? They hear or they read some narrations related to the merits of fighting in the way of Allah, and they're off. That's it. Not to ask a scholar, not to ask a person of knowledge, not to seek permission from their parents, nothing. And because of that, they fall into that which they fall into. Now, so then she goes on to mention another hadith from the Adab al-Mufrad, from the character of an individual, or the manners of an individual. And Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, he has many books. Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, he has many books. And the most famous book is his Jami' al-Sahih, his compilation of authentic hadith, which is known as Sahih al-Bukhari. But Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, also has a book which is also famous, which is called Al-Adab al-Mufrad, or the moral character of an individual. And it's a separate, independent book. And walillahi alhamd, it's present, it's in Arabic, and it's been translated into English. And you have scholars, walillahi alhamd, that have explained it. From the Salafi scholars who have explained Al-Adab al-Mufrad, you had the recently printed explanation by Sheikh Zayd bin Muhammad al-Madkhali, rahimahullah ta'ala. It's 3 volumes, and it's a very good explanation. And you also had a recently printed in Arabic explanation by Sheikh Muhammad Raslan, hafizahullah ta'ala. And to the best of my knowledge, that is the most extensive explanation that you have now. Because Sheikh Zayd, rahimahullah ta'ala, his explanation is 3 volumes. But Sheikh Muhammad Raslan's explanation is 6 volumes. It's 6 volumes, so I would advise, if you have the ability to buy both of them, buy both of them. Buy the explanation of Sheikh Zayd, who is a senior alim. He's an allama, rahimahullah ta'ala, 3 volumes, and you have the recently printed explanation by Sheikh Muhammad Raslan from Egypt, hafizahullah ta'ala, which is 6 volumes. Now, So she brings a hadith from Al-Adab al-Mufrad on the authority of Abu Huraira, where he mentioned that a fever approached the Prophet ﷺ and said to him, and we don't know how can a fever approach the Prophet ﷺ, but as long as the hadith is authentic, we accept it. As long as the hadith is authentic, we accept it and we don't ask how. Like the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. So, and it is the ability of Allah Azza wa Jal to make things which are not living speak. Now, we know that the Prophet ﷺ said that there was a tree in Mecca, that, or a tree stump in Mecca, that used to give salams to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned this. And we know on Yawm al-Qiyamah, أَنْتَقَنَ اللَّهُ الَّذِي أَنْتَقَ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. We know on Yawm al-Qiyamah that Allah Azza wa Jal would give ability to the limbs of the person to bear witness against the individual. And the individual would debate. The individual would debate with his limbs. Why have you spoken against me? And the limbs would respond by saying, the one who gave everything the ability to speak has given us the ability to speak. The one who has given everything the ability to speak, yani Allah has given us the ability to speak. So yes, Allah Azza wa Jal can make the jamadat, the things which are non-living, Allah can make them speak. So in this hadith, we have that a fever approached the Prophet ﷺ and said, send me to the preferred people from amongst you. So the Prophet ﷺ, as a trial and tribulation, and as a means of raising them in levels. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned that at times Allah Azza wa Jal, from the wisdom of trials and tribulations, is that Allah Azza wa Jal wants to raise a people in level in Jannah, and their actions are not enough to raise them, so Allah Azza wa Jal sends them trials and tribulations, and if they are patient with those trials and tribulations, this would be a means for the elevation in levels in Jannah. So this fever approached the Prophet ﷺ and said, send me to the most preferred people from amongst you. The Prophet ﷺ sent the fever to the Ansar, and it stayed with them for 6 days and nights. Then it intensified upon them. So the Prophet ﷺ went to their homes to see their condition, and they complained about the fever. They complained about the illness. So the Prophet ﷺ started entering the house of all of the Ansar and supplicating for them that Allah removes the illness. When the Prophet ﷺ left one of the homes, a woman approached him and said, Ya Rasulullah, by Allah, or by the one who sent you, I swear by the one who sent you with truth, I am from amongst the Ansar, and my father is amongst the Ansar, so invoke Allah to remove this illness. The Prophet ﷺ said, if you want me to invoke Allah, I will do so, that you would become cured. Or you can be patient and you will have Jannah. You can be patient and Jannah is guaranteed for you. The woman said, I will be patient and I will not jeopardize paradise. I will be patient and I will not jeopardize paradise. And this hadith is authentic, and it's mentioned by Imam Muqbil rahimahullah ta'ala in his Musnad as-Sahih. So Abdullah, she comments by saying the affair of the Sahaba is amazing. It's amazing. The way of the companions is amazing. They would bear illness, hunger, separation from their land, separation from their loved ones, and confronting the disbelievers in battle. They did all of this to seek the reward of Allah Azza wa Jal. Now, that is what is that was the way of the Sahaba. The way of the Sahaba, it was about the Jannah of Allah Azza wa Jal. Now let's be realistic. Can we live exactly how the Sahaba lived? In terms of their abstinence from the dunya, in terms of their constant devoteness to the worship of Allah Azza wa Jal and distance himself from the dunya. Obviously today it's very difficult to do so, because of supporting our families, which is an obligation, because of taking care of our livelihood, it is an obligation and the likes of that. But does the person even have the intention to do so? Now, nothing can deter you from having that intention. Now, the life that you live in terms of working and supporting your family and living, a 9 to 5 and all of that, that is understood. But nothing can deter you from having that intention of seeking the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jalla. Nothing can deter you. Nothing can deter you from when you come home after spending some time with your family that you do lock off and you dedicate some time to the worship of Allah. We're not saying you have to be like Abu Huraira, not working, living in the masjid and sticking with the scholars like Abu Huraira did with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're not saying that is upon you, because the scholars mention it is upon you to work. It is upon you to support your family. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَنْسَى نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا, and do not forget that you need a portion of this dunya. So we're not encouraging the brothers to quit their jobs and to go to the masjid and live like the people of Safa, live like the people in the masjid and just study and the likes of it. That's not what we're encouraging you to do. But what we're saying is, for one, the intention. For two, the desire. For three, is that yes, there should be a portion of your time that you dedicate to the worship of Allah Azza wa Jalla, seeking knowledge, making istighfar, involved in ibadah, involved in teaching your family. All of this is from the diligency of an individual in gaining the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jalla, and there's nothing that should deter you from doing so. There's nothing that should deter you from doing so. And Allah Azza wa Jalla mentioned it. She's going to mention that verse, but we'll mention it next week. She mentions it soon after that. She mentioned it soon after that. The verse of Allah in Surah Al-Ankabut, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمَعَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Whoever struggles in our path, we will guide him. We will guide him. So the reality is, if you struggle, first and foremost, starting with the intention and the sincere desire, Allah would show you the path and guide you to the path which is pleasing to him. If you struggle to have consistently fast Mondays and Thursdays, to stand in prayer at night, whether it's for an hour, 2 hours, whether it's for half an hour, to read books on the weekends, if you struggle to do so, Allah is going to make that path easy for you. But Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala mentions, and I'm not sure if it's in Ad-Da' wa Dawa or Kitab al-Fawad, Ibn Qayyim mentions rahimahullah ta'ala, but it takes for an individual to condition themselves. Because when they want to start, when they initially embark on an action of worship, which they want to do to please Allah, it would be difficult in the beginning as a test for them. But once the individual is patient, they will find it to be easy thereafter. Inshallah, this is what we have for this week. We will continue, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, in our reading from the beneficial book of Shaykh Abdullah al-Wadihiyya, hafidhahullah ta'ala, next week. Allah knows best. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira.